In DC, for DC. DC Radio, 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov.
Welcome to Inside Style, DCRadio.gov, 96.3 HD4. I'm your host, George Worrell, and thank you for tuning in today. We have the special pleasure of having DC Office of the Attorney General, Brian Schwalb, here today. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for taking the time to come in and talk to us.
Well, thank you, George.
And looking very dapper as well.
Appreciate the invite.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can hold a candle to how good you look, but
I appreciate that. But thank you for coming in. And, you know, most of the people that come on to the show are Washingtonians, and I understand that you are a third-generation Washingtonian?
I am, yes.
How does that feel?
Well, I love this city. You know, I'm biased, of course, but I don't think there's a better place in the world to live than Washington D.C. So I've got a tremendous amount of pride in our city and in the people who live here and work here. So I am unabashed in my love of this city.
Yeah. How was it growing up here in Washington?
Well, you know, it was interesting. My grandfather was first generation American. His family moved here from Eastern Europe. You know, pursuing what lots of families saw, which was some religious liberty and economic opportunity. He and his family lived in a variety of places in D.C. Fifth and H was where their house was. And he, you know, he put himself through school, became a doctor. We have a family sort of lore that he played the fiddle to make enough money to put himself through medical school. You know, we weren't able to test that. He died before I could really test that hypothesis, so we're going with it. It's a good family story.
Good family story.
But I do remember growing up, and my grandpa used to tell me about swimming across the Anacostia River when he was a kid, and I said, "Come on, Grandpa! Nobody swims in that river."
Well, they're starting that
now,
again. Yeah.
Now it's becoming cleaner, and hopefully people will be swimming again.
Yeah.
So, and then my mom, you know, grew up here. They moved around a bit. She lived in Mount Pleasant, lived right off of Colorado Avenue for a bit before they settled just west of the park near Oregon and Nebraska Avenue. My mom went to Wilson High School, which my middle daughter, Allie, graduated from. So 60 years apart, but they're both connected to that school. You know, in the late 60s, my folks moved, like a lot of white Jewish families, moved out of the city following Martin Luther King's assassination. And so I actually grew up right outside of D.C. in Montgomery County. But every weekend we were back in visiting my grandparents and a lot of connection to the city growing up.
So that exodus was just, and then it kind of takes a turn and people are like coming back and then they're moving out and they're coming back.
No question.
What was your interest in the law as a career path of thinking about it? Or was that your first choice?
Well, I sort of knew from a young age. My father was a lawyer. His father was a lawyer. So I kind of have it in the blood. I liked as a kid, you know, standing up for people who were being bullied. I was a pretty good athlete. I was bigger than a lot of the other kids, but it really pissed me off when I saw kids picking on other kids. And then that's kind of what it means to be a lawyer as you get a little bit older and you realize that you can use some of your other skill sets. I like to argue. I like to debate issues and get into it. And that kind of confluence of being able to use what I like doing and standing up for people kind of fueled that. And I saw it, of course, in my dad and saw how much pride he had in representing clients and standing up for people. So, I kind of pursued that as I went along to college, and it ended up being what fueled my passions.
And I saw that there were a lot of things that you championed, like HIV/AIDS and mentoring kids and, you know, just what was that distinction that said, hey, I don't want to be this big corporate lawyer that makes a whole lot of money and takes on, you know, what was that deciding factor?
Well, look, you know, in all candor, I've had a great legal career. I started after I clerked for a judge at the Justice Department as a public servant, working for the federal government. But then I was in private practice for a lot of years and had a great opportunity to represent interesting businesses and individuals, nonprofits. I also had some great pro bono opportunities in that role. So I'm not at all begrudging the private practice of the law, but I did get an opportunity. I never thought I would run for office, but when the opportunity arose to take what I love doing and put it in service of a city I love, I decided I gotta take a shot at it. And of course, it worked out well. Nobody knows when you set out as a first-time candidate how things are going to happen when you run for office.
Because it was like, I remember reading and looking, and it was very grassroots. And what was the thing that spurred you to say that this is something that I want to do?
I think it's a recognition that you have to realize life comes at you, and you never know how many opportunities you're going to get to do things. Things, when you look back on them, seem like there's a path forward and it was straight and linear, right? But as you're going forward, opportunities come up. Several people who really knew the Office of Attorney General and knew me reached out when our former Attorney General decided not to run again and said, Brian, you ought to really give a thought to putting yourself into this. You have the skill set, the passion. You obviously love the city. And so consider putting yourself into the ring. And
so you talked it over with
I talked it over with
Jessica,
the most important people in my life. Yes.
Mickey, I love that name.
Yeah.
And Sydney.
Yeah. So my wife, Mickey Simon, and my 3 daughters, Jess, Allie, and Sydney. And those are the most important people, obviously, to wrestle with this. And once we had a real good conversation about what that would mean, then I was comfortable expanding the circle to kind of a kitchen cabinet of folks who helped me think through, should I do it? How should I do it? What's the right way to do it?
Yeah. What's the role of the Attorney General here in District of Columbia?
Yeah, such an important question. I think a lot of people realize we have an elected Attorney General. First time we elected an Attorney General was 2014. Before that, for many, many years, the Attorney General was an appointed position. The mayor appointed the Attorney General. But not enough people know what the office does. So basically, I try to describe it as we do 3 basic things. First, we're the chief law officer of the city. All of the legal work that has to get done, defending the District of Columbia and the agencies when they get sued, giving advice to the mayor and to the council and to the agencies, doing some of the corporate transactional work, eminent domain and bond and government contracting. All of that legal work has to be done by a law firm, and the city's law firm is the Office of Attorney General. So that's the first sort of description of the work we do. The second is we are the prosecutor's office for juvenile crime in our city. We have a split system in D.C. Adult crime is charged and prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, appointed by the President of the United States, not elected by the people. The Office of Attorney General has chief responsibility for juvenile crime. So we take that responsibility very, very seriously in terms of how we try to make sure young people are growing up healthy and safe. And when kids do commit crimes, we make sure we hold them accountable, try to get them back on track. So that's the second sort of bucket of work we do. The third is we're charged with protecting the public interest. And that means protecting the environment, protecting consumers, protecting tenants, protecting seniors, bringing affirmative lawsuits to try to make sure that the public interest is protected. We've got 700 professionals in the office. 10 different divisions of work we do. A lot of people don't know that we are responsible for the abuse and neglect system. We represent Child and Family Services. We do the work of enforcement of our child support system. So we are really doing critical work on the ground that impacts people's lives every day. And when people ask me what we do, I try to say, our job is to make people's lives better and safer. That's what we do.
What's your decision process when you are seeing all of these things, knowing the law? Is there a process that you have that you're giving to your staff and to the people that work for you that's been long-standing that you kind of that go-to?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. There's 2 parts to that, I would say. First is internally, we have an incredibly talented team, incredibly diverse team, and want that team to be bringing different perspectives and ideas to the table. And I try to encourage everyone on my team that they're at the table so I can hear from them. We don't make good decisions if people tell me what they think I want to hear. I need to hear what they think. And so having the right people in the room, making sure that when we are making decisions, the right people are there to really debate it, that's a key to making good decisions. Also is setting out what are the core priorities of the office. And I think as the leader, as the elected Attorney General, it was my job to set out what I think the priorities are. And those priorities are informed by what the voters told me, what district residents told me both while I was running, while I was getting ready to take office, and since then, because we have a very robust community engagement team where we're listening as much as we can. And those three priorities are our kids. We want to raise healthy, hopeful kids. That's a public safety strategy. If kids are hopeful, they're safer for themselves and those around them. So we want to invest in kids. We don't want our first interaction with young people to be when the police bring them to us, charging them with a crime. We want to be engaged productively and proactively in kids' lives. The second is addressing some of the gaps we have in our city in equity. We've got a city of abundant resource in human talent, financial resources, economic and environmental and cultural, but we don't share those resources as well as we should. And those gaps in resources and who has access to them mean that we have ever widening gaps in wealth and income and business ownership. So we got to use the law to narrow those equity gaps. So kids, equity, and the third is protecting our core democratic values. You know, our country is really facing a crisis when it comes to the rule of law, institutions that are set up to protect our democracy. We're seeing a lot of the rights that we expected to be always available to us being rolled back. And so our office has to stand for what's right from a democratic, protecting voters, protecting reproductive freedom, protecting the LGBTQ community. All of that is the work of...
We see a surge of attack
everywhere.
So we had the Dr. Unique Morris Hughes, who is Director of Employment Services. And one of the questions that we were talking about is returning citizens. And I always just thought, when I was growing up in Atlantic City, that you just went to the employment office or the unemployment office because you didn't have a job. But this is the only area, and from what you're telling me about your office too, in connection, that someone who is starting whatever phase that you are in your life can get help. What is your views or your thoughts about the returning citizens and getting them back to where they can be functioning in society within the law?
It's critical that we do that. We have a dysfunctional penal and prison system, and that's partially because we're not a state. And when we talk about the importance of statehood, one place where it affects citizens who live in the district is what happens when people are locked up for committing crimes, particularly adults. Because our adults, when they're locked up, are committed to the Federal Bureau of Prisons and oftentimes sent to prisons all over the country. There are 160 different federal penitentiaries that district residents can get sent to. And when you're separated from your family by geography, when you don't have people who can come and visit you and stay in touch, especially if you're away for a lot of years, that's a very disruptive factor for a community. When you come home, when you've been away and dislocated from your family, it's really incumbent upon us as a government to make sure that we make that transition and reentry work, because we need you to be productive. We need you to be independent and come back and integrate, but you've been separated for so long. And if we don't provide services and support, what do we expect is going to happen when people come home? So it's critical that we think about how we're being smart about our returning citizens. We get rid of the stigma. We deal with some of the impediments to job training and job employment opportunities, and we hope people are independent and productive. That, too, is a public safety strategy. It's not about being soft on people who have been locked up. It's about how do we make sure we are safer in the long run as a community.
And that they don't go back. That they feel a part of. It's no secret that I am a recovering alcoholic of 28 years. And
congratulations.
Thank you. But I was fortunate enough that I didn't have to commit a crime. But that's a small spectrum.
Right.
But that second chance, that third chance, just having those resources there. I also think it's important about travel. Do you get an opportunity in what you do to travel and talk to other law enforcement agencies and people who are pretty much doing in the big cities of what you're doing?
So the answer is yes, both with respect to the attorney general community. There's a national set of attorneys general across the country, which we are regularly meeting with, both Republican and Democrat. And there are AGs that have specific sets of responsibilities and jurisdictions like I have. And we are often in communication. I was in Minneapolis just last week. Keith Ellison, who's the attorney general for the state of Minnesota, has some very innovative ideas he's thinking about in terms of law enforcement. And there are also a group of elected prosecutors who meet regularly to talk a little bit about what they're confronting in their communities. Many, like I, are elected. And so the political pressures associated with crime and public safety are tricky and can be sometimes toxic. And so it's helpful to see how other elected officials are handling
these situations.
Absolutely.
So your downtime, what do you with such a job that with such responsibility, what is it that you like to do? Where's the last place that you've traveled that you've had a great time?
So one of my happy places is the state of Colorado. My wife Mickey is originally from Denver. And so we have spent a lot of time in Colorado, have family and friends there, and I enjoy very much getting out to the fresh air in the mountains. And
do you ski?
I ski because there's this concept called gravity. And gravity is the only reason I get down the hill. I muscle my way down the hill. My wife skis beautifully, but I really enjoy the mountains as much in the summer, maybe even more than in the wintertime. And I found a joy of just kind of walking, hiking, literally taking pictures of wildflowers and the kind of total unplugging from the experience of being in the city is very restorative.
What inspires you? Like, what inspires you to say, okay, I'm getting up this morning, I'm having my coffee. It may be like something major happening, but what inspires you to say, I'm going to keep doing this? I like where I am. I like what I'm doing. What's the inspiration?
I feel incredibly fortunate to have a job that I love doing. I love being a lawyer. I'm a law geek. Sometimes some of the issues that come up are really sort of esoteric, heady things. But using my brain I'm curious about how to solve problems. But to get a chance to practice law with the people in the Office of Attorney General who I'm privileged to work with, I have the most talented group of professionals who I could ever have expected to work with. And I've had some incredibly talented people to work with over the years. And I get to get up every day, practice law with people who I admire and like, and do important work. And sometimes it's the small things that nobody's ever going to notice, but we're going to impact somebody's life. I'll give you an example. We have a consumer protection hotline where people can call the Office of Attorney General if they think they've been taken advantage of, ripped off. And oftentimes somebody will report back to me that a senior called and $600 disappeared from her checking account. And our team is able to figure out with the bank and the vendors what happened and to get that $600 back into a senior's checking account. That is perhaps a life-changing moment for that senior who's worried about how am I going to pay the bills. That will never make the front page of the Washington Post. Nobody's ever going to say, but that affects people's lives in a very real way. And that happens thousands of times every week.
But it's also word of mouth, too. Because that senior is probably going to tell somebody that at church or at the synagogue, wherever, that I was helped by the Attorney General's office. And that's more powerful, I think, from that perspective than having it advertised that somebody personally can say that your office helped them. How do you feel that? What was the opening that you said, hey, I want the city or the community or the residents of the District of Columbia, there's an open door policy. I have this feeling that you have an open door policy. Many times in these situations, it's kind of, you have to go through this person, go through that person. What is that feeling? Why did you want to make that reality?
Well, look, I don't think you can be an effective attorney, no matter where you're practicing law, if you're not listening twice as much as you're talking. My dad gave me a lot of great advice before he died, and one of it was God gives us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And that helps you be a better advocate and a lawyer. You listen and you make sure that you're hearing what's happening in real time. For us to do our job in the Office of Attorney General, as well as everybody in the District of Columbia deserves, we've got to be in regular communication and listening to the community. So we're out through our community engagement teams and our litigating divisions in community listening. And I want the community to know that we're here to help. So hotlines for consumer protection, for workers' rights, for tenants, for people who have concerns about their environmental conditions. We need to hear from people in real time, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to know how to find us, how to engage with us. We're not always going to be the ultimate answer to people's questions, but I promise you that if you reach out to the Office of Attorney General, we're going to be responsive. We're going to get back to you. I've made it very clear, and I think it's the ethos of the office. It's not acceptable for people to call and say, hey, it's not our problem, go somewhere else to try to figure it out. We will help people.
Even if you can't do it in your office.
Even if we can't do it in our office, we're going to help people find where they should go to get help.
Well, in finishing up, I could talk to you forever. I love the law.
I hope you'll come. You'll invite me back.
Yeah, but you're gonna have to bring your wife and maybe your kids.
That's a deal.
What advice would you give someone young that's starting out that may not career thinking about? What about a career in law enforcement? What would some words of encouragement that you would give them?
There are a lot of different ways to contribute positively in law enforcement. Our police are doing really important work, and the conditions in which they operate are very difficult and challenging, but also really rewarding, on the ground, able to help people in terms of their most serious and tragic moments, as well as some of the celebrations they experience. Law enforcement, though, isn't limited to being a police officer in security. There are lots of ways to be contributing to a safer community. And I think if you have an interest in the law, even if you think in a moment, I'd encourage you to pursue it, because it's a profession that you can use in so many different ways to make the world and our community safer, kinder, more peaceful, healthier. And it's a long road. It's a hard road, but anything worthwhile in life is going to be hard and long. Yeah.
How can we reach you? How can if we want to? Is your office on social media, or is there any way we can drop a line to your office or to you to say?
Absolutely. We have a great website. We're on all of the social media, and I know my comms team can make sure that sometimes I feel a little bit like a dinosaur when it comes to some of the social media, but I'm getting better. Sometimes I joke around with my team. I said, are we going viral on this? And they said, boss, you don't want to go viral on this. So be careful what you wish for. So, but yeah, we're on all the social media platforms, and we have hotlines, and we would love to hear from your listeners and anybody who would like to reach out to us.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Attorney General Brian Schwalb.
George, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on and talking to our listeners. Thank you for tuning in to Inside Style, DC Radio 96.4. I am George Worrell, and remember, real style starts with being comfortable in your own skin. We'll see you next time.
In DC, for DC, DC Radio, 96.3 HD4, and DCRadio.gov.